So in this video, I'm going to go over PSTV, one of the big runners last week. And I want to talk about how you can use fundamental patterns in addition to technical chart patterns to anticipate a trade. So with PSTV, they had recently done a private placement right here. And we've been seeing a lot of these lately where they have, obviously warrants, but they have this interesting reset. Let me go into it here. And just to take a step back so you know what I'm doing here, the 8K is what kind of spells out the details of the deal. And then you have these exhibits here, and they usually have one for the warrants. So they have one for, this is the Series A warrants, these are the Series B. These are the kind of like the fine print details. So they briefly mentioned this cashless exercise, but if you want to know the actual details, you would come into this warrant exhibit here. And then we can see, if we go down here, this alternative cashless exercise, what this means is that if they choose to do an alternative cashless exercise, they get the number of warrants times 3. So I think in this case, let me just quickly go back. The Series B warrants here, 28 million. If they were to exercise them on the alternative cashless basis, it would be, do the math here, 70 something million warrants, and they don't have to pay anything for them. So the implications of that is that it ultimately reduces their cost basis on what they actually paid in the offering, because they're getting essentially all those shares, additional shares free, because they get to exercise them for no cash. And the reason why the companies do this is because it's sort of like compensation, because the thing is they have to get shareholder approval actually to be able to not only issue these, but also approve the cashless exercise feature. So kind of as compensation for the investor having to wait for that, they give this alternate cashless provision. So ultimately what it does is that at the end of the day, it reduces the cost basis. I'm not going to do the calculation now, but what they actually paid for all the shares that they're going to be getting. So I guess to put it simply, at the end of the day, they're going to be getting a lot of shares for a lower cost basis, less than the 66 cents you see here. So how is this going to affect the price action? Well, first off, they can't technically do anything with them because, one, they need shareholder approval, and two, this was a private placement, so they still need to be registered. And if I go into the summary here, again, these are the exhibits we talked about. Another one is this 10.2, which is a registration rights agreement. Because with a private placement, unlike a registered offering, they can't sell the shares immediately. They have to be registered first on a form S1 or S3. And in this case, the registration rights agreement spells out by when the company needs to file a registration, in this case by April 4th. So there's still some time for that. They still have to actually do the vote, but we're looking at about a month out until that they can basically do anything. However, what they can do is they can short the stock, and often they will do that because they don't want to miss out on any profit on this huge rise in the stock price. And so going back to, I guess, what I first mentioned was fundamental patterns, what we can do, and what you've often seen me do in other videos on our YouTube channel, is I look for similar fundamental situations where it's a similar fundamentals or even same players involved, whether it's the investors in the offering, the underwriter, etc. And in this case, I saw that NXU, so this is a chart of NXU, I posted this, that I thought it was shaping up similarly, both technically and fundamentally. I'll just go into the technicals real quick, and then I'll go into the fundamentals. And you can see here, just switching between the charts, this kind of big day 2 run and then fade off on day 2. And so, I mean, the reason why technical patterns play out is because you have sort of the same fear, greed, emotions, and traders with the same approaches approaching these patterns over and over again. That's why they kind of can tend to play out similarly. And the same thing goes with fundamental setups. So with NXU, it was the same situation, and that they had also done this private placement I'm not going to go through all the cashless warrants and stuff, but it's same sort of cashless warrants that could be exercised on a cashless basis, which reduces their cost basis quite a bit. And then the timing of this run up here was about 30 days or so before they were able to get approval and even register the shares. So you can see the private placement here was on December 27th. This approval here was about a month and a half after that. So the timing was similar in that they were going to get a bunch of cashless warrants approved and ultimately reduce the cost basis for the shares they paid for. So this is another scenario where they are incentivized to short it. So similar with technical patterns, with fundamental patterns, you see the same thing happening over and over again as well, because the holders of the warrants, they also are going to have a similar approach in similar situations, right? They're not going to just switch up what they do every time. You know, kind of like with traders, if you trade a certain way, you're going to approach a certain setup the same way every time. That's how you profit. That's how you make money in the market, by having a repeatable process. So these hedge funds have a repeatable process as well. So in this case, what you can do is you can expect them to get a substantial short position on this run up. But just an example I wanted to walk through. And I see the other good thing about when you have these kind of blueprints to follow, where a stock is kind of, I guess, supposed to behave a certain way on this sort of setup. Also, ahead of offerings, typically stocks will trade a certain way ahead of delistings, ahead of reverse splits. With these kind of fundamental / technical setups, you expect to see similar behavior. So then when it deviates from that, you can recognize pretty quickly and determine that your thesis is invalid. So anyways, that's kind of how I think about these and approach these. And that's it.